Sean. Hey, Radcast is on.
And welcome to the show, Mr. Jim Zumbo.
Gentlemen, I am pleased to be here, and I use that term loosely when I say gentlemen.
Al Linder. Just want to welcome you to the show. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to hang out with us on a podcast for a little bit.
Hey, I'm looking forward to it. There's nothing makes me happier than a cold in Minnesota. If I can't be out fishing, I should be talking about fishing.
Hailing from Wisconsin, Jana Waller.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's Radcast. Hunting, fishing, and everything in between. Powered by Bow Spider.
Brought to you by PK Lures and High Mountain Seasonings.
And now, here's your hosts, Patrick Edwards and David Merrill.
Well, hello and welcome everybody to Radcast Outdoors. I'm David Merrill, and for once, we have Patrick joining us from the road. This is a little change of roles here, sir.
Yeah, well, usually when I'm on the road, I can't join, but I have the stuff to do it now. So, yeah, you have to put up with me for a little while.
Well, no, we're certainly glad that you could join up. And, you know, we're getting into dead middle of ice fishing season. And, you know, I'm starting trade show season, which is a fun time of year. I get to travel the country and go meet everybody face to face and shake some hands. So definitely, if I'm not in the studio, Patrick will be, but when I'm in the studio, Patrick will be out. That's the way it's going to work. So, well, everybody, I mean, I'm glad you're back for another episode. Obviously, we have 3 really cool sponsors. Check them out. Go use their gear. People have asked me all the time, do you guys really use that, or are you just promoting it? And I'll tell you, I use their products before, after, and during, and I will continue to do so. Why? Because I truly believe in not only the products, but the people that stand behind those products. So shout out to PK, High Mountain, and Bow Spider. So today I'm pretty excited. We have a guest here. He's been back and forth. We've talked a little bit. I met this gentleman this summer, and he's got a really interesting background. I think he's got some knowledge that's going to be really exciting to share. Tom Schneider is the kind of curator owner of Stuck in the Rut, which is a YouTube, Instagram platform. So Tom grew up hunting, fishing like we all did, and he's turned into some pretty good success here lately. And I've spent some time watching some of his YouTube videos. He's hunted all over the North American continent, taking animals, and his passion runs as deep as Patrick is mine. So Tom, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, thank you for having me. I'm really excited. This is something I always look forward to, is talking about what I love to do. I guess you could say. So I appreciate talking to people that share the same viewpoints as I do. And so, yeah.
So right off the bat, how'd you get started in the outdoors? Take us all the way back to the beginning.
All right. Well, like to my great-great-grandfather? Or,
sure.
No, just kidding. So I think the one thing that's really special about where I live is my great-grandfather, he did move to Idaho, several years ago, and, pretty much bought a bunch of land, and which, as we know, back then was super dirt cheap. And, he had a nice little place. He lived out here, farmed a lot. And then eventually my mom came about, and my dad was a logger in the area, and he met my mom. But my dad was a very passionate hunter. And, talking to him, he always has those stories when archery season first came about for elk back in the 1990s. He says there was hardly anybody in the woods, and there was just a lot of elk to hunt. And I always loved the stories. And, I think what's special though, too, even though I look young and I am young, I got to experience what I never thought I would say this, but I got to experience the old days a little bit, in my teens, and really good hunting. And our family has pulled a lot of big animals off the mountain. So between elk, mule deer, moose, and a lot of other critters, we are very fortunate to do that. And, if my dad wasn't hunting, or he was working, and so all of our family members have become, or pretty much like my dad in that way, where we're hardworking and we love to hunt. And as a teenager, I always just felt like I was living a dream, because I worked hard even in my teens, but I was still under my parents' house. So I was able to make enough money to hunt. And I just pretty much bounced back and forth like that quite a bit. And, it wasn't until after high school and I had to live on my own, I'm like, well, how do I create that scenario for myself again, right? Like, how do I allow myself to continue to hunt and hunt the way I was as a teen? And so what I kind of did, and hopefully I'm not, if you need to say something, you can stop me. I created a financial goal for myself to have everything paid for. And the one thing I realized is rent is expensive, and so is owning a vehicle. And so I busted my butt between logging, doing construction, and working in the oil field in my 20s. I saved up, accumulated a lot of money, and I built a house in my 30s. And now I could comfortably say I have a house paid for and all my vehicles paid for. And I make now just a very comfortable living, and I can just simply take off the fall to hunt and not worry about very high expenses. So that was kind of one of my biggest goals, is I wanted to live that dream of just not having a lot of expenses. A lot of people's dreams is to become rich. That wasn't my dream. My dream was just to knock out the normal American, or daily American expenses that most people have, and beat the system, and just be able to hunt, take off, like I said, as much time as I'd like. And that's what I do. And so very fortunate where we live. Of course, being in Idaho, there's a lot of opportunity. So,
well, an avid listener told me years and years ago, an avid listener of this podcast, big house, hunt a little house, hunt a lot. And so I live in a very humble, meager house as well, so that I can
mine's a box. Mine's a box, but it works. So,
well, that's cool that Dad was getting you involved, before you really even realized what you were doing. And, you mentioned a little bit about the good old days, the heydays. And, I started late 90s with archery hunting, but we're closer to 2050 than we are 1990 at this point. And urbanization has changed the landscape. And that's some of the things I want to get into today on hunting. I can remember coming to Idaho 2009, 2010, and 2011. And during archery season, you could go to the gas station and pick up an additional elk tag over the counter as a non-resident. It's been 3 years since I've got an elk tag in Idaho because the way they've changed it. I even sent a buddy to Idaho to stand in line, and he was there to buy tags for 3 people, and he got the first tag bought, and by the time he turned around by the second, they were sold out. So, it's unfortunate to see the changes, but there are some changes out there for the good. And some of what I want to get into today is specifically wolves. Here not very long ago, you couldn't hunt a wolf, you couldn't harvest a wolf, you couldn't target a wolf. And you've, here in the last few years, built a name around specifically hunting wolves. You're obviously, that's not your only trick or hat. You've done moose to caribou to elk to all those species. But I really wanted to, pick your brain specifically, kind of some topics about how to be a wolf hunter, how to be a better wolf hunter, how do wolves interact in the landscape. And one of the questions I want to get into later in the podcast is, have you seen a difference hunting ungulates in areas where the large carnivores are intact, i.e. grizzly bears, mountain lions, wolves, versus hunting somewhere where there isn't grizzly bears and wolves? So let's start off, what are some key differences you've seen growing up in your state pre and post wolf introduction?
Yeah, and so before the wolf, so just to explain a little bit what a year would look like for me in my teens. So September, the technique that everybody would do to elk hunt was bugling off the road, right? So you'd go on a drainage, bugle off the road, get a bull bugling, then we get ready, drop off in the drainage, chase the elk around. And you still had to cover miles, but to get at least a bull located was not too big of a deal. We never had an overgrazing issue. We've always had a lot of habitat for elk and a lot of habitat for wildlife. I felt like the best thing that Idaho did during that time in the late 1990s to the early 2000s is they had a way of maximizing, like our mountains were maximized with wildlife populations, I guess you could say. I don't feel like we had an overpopulation, but we had a healthy number of wildlife. And a lot of it had to do with logging, where people first have the idea that logging is bad for the environment. What it's done to us, where it's actually created habitat. It wasn't until the 1950s, and some of these old timers I talked to this day, they said that elk never even moved into our unit until the logging started, because there was just no habitat for elk and no habitat for mule deer or even moose. So it wasn't really until the 1950s where actually wildlife numbers started to increase and expand, because, you know, the timber gets so thick here where I live, where it almost creates a canopy and prevents that brush from growing. And so with cutting that timber, that brush allows to grow. You got a lot of browse. And so talking about habitat, you know, that actually really helped a lot. And back in the 1990s, where I'd say our highest elk population was, there was 18 mills running in our area, 18 mills. And so, you know, my dad being a logger, and, you know, pretty much most of my family, my grandpa, he was hauling logs off the mountain. Some of these old roads that are all growing up with trees and stuff, I'll walk them. Like, I remember my grandpa hauled logs off that road, you know? And it's crazy to see, because they're just vertical. I'm like, I can't believe he hauled a log truck off that road. That's insane. But, you know, and even in the 2000s, you know, we had mountain lions and we did have grizzlies, but those were still newer topics where people are like, oh, the grizzlies are so bad here. I'm seeing a truck every time I'm out in the woods. But it started to increase to the point where rather than seeing a track of a grizzly in the woods about every other time, you're actually seeing a grizzly in the woods about every other time you're out in the woods. It was starting to get a little bit nerve-wracking. Multiple times elk hunting, we've have called in grizzlies by accident, cow calling. I had one that came in 13 yards, and I just had to stop calling and let it walk off. That was a little hair-raising. My dad, my little brother, they had one come charging in at a cow elk call, and it stopped, you know, put on the brakes. And I'm glad they didn't shoot, because they thought it was a black bear at first. It just, when they videoed it and everything, and I even posted that video online, I kid you not, 80% of the people said black bear, shoot it. Just from the first like 10 seconds of the video, it looks like a big black bear. But then when he starts to turn and starts to run off, you start seeing that hump. You start seeing those long claws, and, you know, they're just like, wait, it just doesn't look like a black bear. And the one thing you learn here is you pack heat, right? Even if you're archery hunting, you have a pistol. I don't trust pepper spray. I trust a bullet a little bit more. And so we've always packed heat. That's probably the biggest thing we do. But the reality was, although we had grizzlies and mountain lions, we still had wildlife, right? We still had elk. We still had deer. And sure, predator management is important, right? And we were always big into it. We understand that black bears can knock a lot of calves down in the spring, especially when they're fresh out of the den. Mountain lions, man, it irritates me when I have a good group of muley bucks that are wintering in a wintering range, and I want to find their sheds. And I'm like, and there's a mountain lion just living in there. I'm like, I don't care how big that lion is, I'm going to get that lion killed. So I'll borrow some hounds. In the past, I've made some hound hunters mad because they like to let them grow and get big. But I'm like, if I have a mountain lion, you know, messing with a small group of muleys in a drainage, I want to take care of that lion and get it out of there, you know. So in my brain and just growing up, predator management has been engraved into my head. And it wasn't until about 2007 is when I first saw my first wolf in our area. We really didn't even see a wolf truck until it was between 2006, 2007. It was mule deer season. Travis and I were hunting here. We've always hunted. A drainage where we would, if you sat there in this one particular spot, and if you sat there for a full day, you'd count between 12 to 15 bucks, just passing through looking for does. This one particular day, nothing. And we didn't know why. And I was probably like, oh, I'm not going to do the math right now, but like I said, I was in my teens, and my brother and I were sitting there and we're like, what? There's nothing in this drainage. What's going on? And so we decided, just, as stupid teenagers are, let's do a pop shot across the canyon and see if we can get stuff moving. There's a bunch of little timber patches, right? We shoot across the canyon, and this black wolf just bolts out of the timber and starts running down the mountain. And that was the first thing I ever thought in my mind with the first wolf I ever saw was, holy crap, that was big. I never realized the true size of a wolf until then. I am looking at this wolf running down the mountain at 400 yards, and the body of this wolf is bigger than any deer that I've ever seen. I'm just like blown away at the size of what these wolves are. You think of I think previously we thought a wolf was about the size maybe of a little bigger than a coyote. I mean, it's a night and day difference. You know what I mean? There's no comparison. And after that day, we've never had a good day hunting mule there until more recently, until, we started getting the numbers under control. But it was almost like a night and day difference. When the wolf pack moved in there, we just stopped. I mean, I don't say we stopped seeing deer, but I wasn't seeing a dozen bucks a day. It was like you'd go in there for 2 or 3 days and you'd see maybe 2 to 3 deer. That's it. And it wasn't something that happened long term, like if a mountain lion population grows. You'll notice how mountain lion or black bears, if their populations grow, you'll start seeing animal numbers drop. It was almost immediate. Like you had to put on a blindfold not to see it. So that was my first wolf experience.
I was going to say, Tom, the first wolf I ever saw was one that got hit on the highway. And this was back in the 90s, right after reintroduction. Really? And I was blown away at the size of the paw. I mean, it was just absolutely humongous. And, I've had big dogs, like, my family, we've had St. Bernards and stuff. Is every bit as big as a St. Bernard. I mean, they are gigantic animals, and people don't appreciate that, because if you watch some of these videos, like out of Yellowstone, you'll see a grizzly bear on a kill, right? And then the wolves start coming in, and you see them kind of circling around, doing their thing, and starting to kind of get after each other, over the food. And the grizzly bear isn't that much bigger than the wolf. Like, you look at it and you look stature-wise, and you're like, dang,
you're right.
They're really tall.
Like back to back, I mean, sure, weight-wise, sure, but like back to back.
Yeah, stature-wise, they're really close, and you're like, dang, that is a big animal. But I don't think a lot of people understand just how massive a full-grown adult male wolf is. I mean, they are huge.
Yeah.
So sticking with the ungulate theme for a second, is there a technique you've found that works, or a tip or a trick that is helpful in hunting an area that has wolves for ungulates, right? Say, is there something you found, i.e., here where we hunt, I'm pretty close to the park, and the ungulates are somewhat stable, even though those large carnivores are intact. But I'll tell you, if wolves come through and howl in our camp, the elk shut up for 3 to 5 days. And, we've found that it's better to be less vocal and be better at just sneaking in wallows and not trying to attract attention to those wolves or grizzly bears. Because you'll have a drainage that has 3 to 5 bulls just going off all night. The wolves howl, and for days, I think those elk just go find hidey holes. So is there a tip or trick out there that you might implement in a situation where you're hunting a drainage that has wolves in it?
Yeah. So a couple of things. So we a little bit of the evolution of wolves have created is the first thing I've seen bulls go to are the cliffs, and at least in our area. What I've noticed, like elk without wolf pressure, they love meadows. Elk love those deep dark holes on the north facing slopes. That changed with the wolf. Wolves also love those areas. Wolves, they kill really easy in that thick stuff, And so what we have seen, our wolves or the elk have actually utilized the openings more, actually. So that was probably one of the first things we saw, where the elk would actually stay in the cliffs. And I mean, in 2013, as we were bugling it, I was a big mature bull elk that I ended up archerying. As we were bugling that bull elk, a mountain goat walked past me. And I'm like, why am I hunting elk in the cliffs? Why am I bugling elk in the cliffs? Why not in the hole where those wallows are and stuff? And the wolves just found out that they're just keen and killing in there, you know? And so that was a little bit of the evolution that I saw. Also, too, the other thing we noticed is in some of the areas closer to human activity, it seems that the elk they prefer archery pressure than wolf pressure. And so there was this weird dynamic where in the past, because we had horses and mules, so wheat pack in the backcountry, it used to be the farther we get back, the less, less people, more elk. And we were having a heyday, that's what we loved. Like, I'm willing to hike and most people aren't. And now it was the opposite, where the farther you go back, the less elk tracks you'd see and the more wolf tracks you'd see. And so there was this weird dynamic where almost in a sense, the majority of the elk we were hunting were within 2 miles from the main roads. Those were the herds. And honestly, the areas with the most hunting pressure seemed to hold the bigger bulls. It's just like the bigger bulls would wise up to the archery hunters. They wouldn't really come in the calls, but they know they'd rather be there than being around wolves. And that's what we were seeing. I could still drop a pin and tell you guys, this summer, 15 miles, go back here and find me an elk. I could do that this summer and you won't find an elk there. But what you will find wolves. And it's very unfortunate that happened. But the way we were adapting, so going back to your question, another thing we would do is we were actually just staying ahead of the curve. And so on the east side of our unit, that's where wolves hit first. And that area, it got wiped out within 2 year span. And after that, it slowly moved all the way to the west side of our unit. But what we would do is we just started exploring more country that we haven't normally hunted before. And so we were getting another elk, and we just kind of stayed ahead of the wolves in a sense. And that got us by for about 7 years, but until the wolves completely engulfed this unit along with the rest of Idaho. And finally, I was traveling and trying to get away from them. You were talking too about elk shutting up. That happened to me in a day where I archered 3 wolves. I told you. I remember I told you that story.
Yeah, let's go ahead, and it's a great time because that story still turns goose up. So you're out archery elk hunting and continue that story.
Yeah, and so this was a time I still didn't quite like this. So season was available, right, for hunters, and so in 2011, season was open. At this point, I was like, I got to kill my first wolf. So first thing I do, it was a piece of cake. I tell you what, like I grabbed a wolf howler and I called in 2 wolves immediately and shot my first wolf. I shot a beautiful gray wolf, wounded a black one, and the black one ran off in the timber. I tracked it away, couldn't find him. Like, oh, well, I got this gray one down. And I was like, oh, wolf hunt's a piece of cake. So I took the hide in. I was like, I'll just sell it and I'll kill more. But little did I know how quickly wolves wise up to hunting pressure. And that was probably one of the biggest learning curves I ever had to go through. And then that rest of that year, I couldn't kill a wolf. I was like, I tried every trick in the book. I mean, there wasn't even a book. What am I even saying? There wasn't a book about how to hunt wolves. So I was like, coming up with my own ideas. We're passing ideas along with each other. Another older gentleman who's retired, him and I would both pass ideas to each other. And, he got more into the trapping side just because he's older, And so him and I both were hunting the same areas. He was trapping, I was hunting, but we were both kind of working on the same areas. And I won't he's kind of a low key type guy, so I won't give his name. But him and I both gained kind of an obsession in trying to manage these wolves. And well, anyways, it was, a couple years after that, I just started to surrender to it. I'm like, gosh, they're just so hard to hunt. So I kind of surrendered, didn't hunt them. And you're not even going to believe when I say this, but I spent 18 days in archery season without an elk beagle. And I was running ridgetop to ridgetop. I'm like, this is getting ridiculous. And, you know, this was a point where it just felt like all hope was lost. And I got into an area where we used to, it's kind of an area toward the end of September. Some big bulls will typically pull in with cows, and we've caught some pretty good. And to explain our quality of elk, I'm trying to not bounce everywhere. Our elk quality, like a big bull, pretty much maxes out between 340, 350, even sometimes 320. Like they're like these big, heavy timber bulls, and that's about where they'll max out at. And I was hunting that area, and I came across some elk tracks, fresh. You can smell the urine. End of September, I throw a bugle, nothing, not a single bugle. I'm like, that is so weird. Like, I don't care if this bull's a runner or not, he would have answered that call. They're like, well, I'll go to the wallow where I used to catch him. So I start side hilling through this wallow. And do you ever have that, like, I don't know if you call it the sixth sense?
Hair on your spider sense.
Yeah, the spider. I get it. The spider sense.
The tingle, the hair on the back of your neck stands up. Something's just not quite right. A couple times I've had it happen to me.
That's the feeling I got. And it was like, something's not right here. It was almost a eerie feeling. Like, yeah, I was feeling it. And it was almost too quiet. It's like there's a peaceful quiet. This was not a peaceful quiet. Like no bird chirping, no squirrel. I mean, no bird, no squirrels, just like so dead quiet. And I had this like weird intuition to look west. And I looked, and as I was just cow calling, moving through the trees quietly, you know, trying to cover my sound. Well, what that did is it sparked a wolf pack, and I had a wolf trotting in at me, very close range. And it took everything in my power to just have the self-control, just to just knock the arrow, just pull back. And he was trotting, and, you know, I felt he wasn't going to attack me. You know, that's not the feeling I got from the situation, but it made me nervous. I had a full grown wolf trotting in at me under 20 yards. And by the time I had my bow pulled back, he was 8. And and the part that I don't quite remember, just because it was such in the moment, I don't remember if he was still running or if I remember right, he kind of just slightly started to stop, just because it was almost like that, this doesn't look right. You know what I mean? They realized I don't look like an elk. And then I put an arrow just right below the chin. I put an arrow, just like it's a wolf. And he took 2 leaps away from me and just rolled over. I was like, holy crap. I can't believe that just happened. You know, that's something I would never have thought of an experience in the woods. And then after that, before I even had to time to even register what happened, the rest of the pack came out of the brush and started sniffing that wolf. Well, at this point, everything's still under 20 yards. And I have a whole wolf pack right there. And it doesn't even know I'm there at this point. I just killed the only witness. So I'm like, so I pulled back. And I'm looking, I'm like, all I see right now is a neck shot. You know, there's between 2 trees. Now, elk, mule deer, I would never make that shot, right? It's a wolf. Whatever, give it a shot, right? I shot, and that arrow, again, kid you not, I don't have it on video, but I have pictures of this, you know, of the aftermath. It completely spined that wolf right in the neck, and it just drops on top of the other one. I was like, what is happening right now? And there was 2 wolves left. One ran to the right, which completely disappeared in the brush. I couldn't see anymore. One ran to the left, and he was kind of in the brush, and he's looking back. Same ordeal. I pulled back. I'm like, gosh, I wouldn't shoot through the brush with a bow on a deer elk, but it's a wolf. I shot, and I think my arrow did, deflect, but it was center mass. It hit him center mass, and that wolf yelped, ran right toward me, ran right past me, and I could see the blood just coming out of sight. And I watched that wolf tip over probably 5 to 6 times, just like it just lost consciousness, tip over, lose consciousness, tip over, just like that. And then he just disappeared in the alders. I was like, holy crap, I just can't believe that just happened. And after that day, I just realized like I need to put in more time to figure this out because, you know, it just made me so like, it was a cool experience, but I was still really upset of the fact that we had to deal with this issue, you know, and they were just so hard to figure out. But at this point, our friend, the one I was telling you about, he was started to figure out the wolf trapping, and he was actually starting to get a good number of them, but it still wasn't doing it. You know, it wasn't keeping up to the reproductive rate because he trapped most of the pack out, and then the next year there'd be no whole new pack again. They just reproduce so fast. So that's kind of where everything started, where my wheels started to turn. And I'm like, okay, I need to figure this wolf hunting out now because if I'm going to have any future in this area, I mean, I was traveling, so I hunted New Mexico, I hunted Colorado. I was getting away from the wolves as much as I could. But it came to a point where like, you know, I love this area and I know the habitat is suitable for wildlife. And that's enough. I need to figure this out. So that's kind of where my hunting started and I started going from there. Does that make sense?
How long was first wolf harvest to third wolf harvest, time span wise?
So are you talking from the first one to the 3 wolves?
No,
or?
just the 3 wolves from the 8-yard shot to the last one.
Oh, from like the range wise, or
no, how distance or time span from the first arrow to the third arrow flight? Are we talking 3 minutes? Or are we talking seconds?
It felt like an hour, but it probably all happened under 15 seconds. I don't know. It was just as fast as I can knock an arrow. It was just, you know, I killed that first one. The pack came out, knocked that arrow, and it was just as if you're trying to put arrows in a target as fast as you can. But everything is like, you know, in those moments, everything's slow motion to where it felt like I had time. Thank goodness that, you know, I feel like in my younger years, I used to really struggle with my buck fever, but when I got older, I've been able to control it. And to the point to where I feel like in the moment I can do well, but it's the after the fact where it all kicks in. So that in that scenario, after everything happened, you know, in the moment I did really well, right? I kept my composure, I got it done. But after everything happened, I had to sit down and just hold my head and just like, I had to do that for like 15 minutes and just like, what the freak just happened?
So did you keep one of those wolf belts?
I couldn't even walk up to the dead wolves yet. I just had to sit there for a bit and just let my heart, then my heart really came in, and it was just like, it made me want to throw up. I wanted to throw up. I couldn't eat. It was lunchtime at that point. I couldn't eat my sandwich. You know, I lost my appetite. But then it finally I let it calm down. It finally settled. And I got him all skinned out. Well, so the thing is, the third one I never found though. I found that the 2 were right there. I never found the third one, but I know he died. I know for a fact he died. But the problem was when everything happened, it was just downpour rain. And I just, you know, I went in that alder patch and I just couldn't follow that blood trail. I'm just like, gosh. And then it could have been also to him just like, you know, I already got 2 dead wolves. Let's just work on them. I wish I spent a little more time finding that third one because I know he was dead. You know what I mean? I watched him tip over multiple times, you know, just like, you know, like I said, he's just losing consciousness. And anyways, but that's kind of where it all started. And yeah, like it was a very small window. Like I said, and you're talking about watching our videos so many times in my head, I think I know what happens in a hunt. Like I had an archery elk and I thought it was slow motion too, where I'm like, oh, like I remember the elk just walking really slow right past me. Well, when I watch the video, it's like he pops out, I shoot it and he's gone. And it's like in my head, I felt like everything happened a lot slower. You know what I mean? I think when we're in the moment, things are different than, you know, am I making any sense at all there?
100% you're making sense. There's times like we filmed a Cape Buffalo hunt, and several of those encounters with Cape Buffalo, specifically one, I remember he's standing there, right? And I thought he was standing there for an hour with his head in this bush. We go back to the GoPro footage, and I mean, I turn the GoPro on, record. As I'm moving up to go to full draw, he turns and snorts and runs. So it was like 2 seconds. But in my mind, he was standing there for 3 minutes. I just couldn't get it done. So yeah, there is a little time warp happens when you're going to that uber high, high vigilance kind of, adrenaline rush type of thing that happens. This is about the only way you can get into that state without tragedy. So
exactly.
Getting a little bit back, switching gears, you've hunted Colorado, New Mexico. You talked about, you saw the elk go from pretty plentiful, pretty easy. You guys were getting on mules, horses, going back and getting some big bulls, to where now you're really having to work to get elk. Is that part of what switched you to change and chase wolves, was just that there was no more elk in your units?
Yeah. And, and I'm not just a big hunter, but a shed hunter too. I am the type of individual who really enjoys the history, having a history with an animal, right? When I travel to New Mexico and kill an elk, I think it's cool, but it's like an animal I didn't really have history with, There's something about having where I can go into a wintering range every year and pick up multiple sheds of a big bull, and then eventually capitalizing on that bull. It's like, wow, I know he smelt me multiple times. I know I've seen him multiple times, and finally he made the mistake. There's something about that, it's just very magical, hunting. I don't want to say spiritual, but it kind of is in some weird way. And I have a form of respect for a big bull like that, where people think hunters were just cruel and want to kill everything. I mean, honestly, when I kill a big bull, I just have the utmost respect for it. I don't want to suffer. And if he outsmarts me, I applaud that bull, Mike. And I'll still talk about a bull to that day. There's bulls that I've had shed twos that I never found, and I'm pretty sure he died of old age. And I'm just and I'll still talk about that bull just because I respected him so much and outsmarting me. And I think that's just the way I am when hunting. But I was losing that. We were losing that old age class. And the wolves, the biggest times that the wolves were doing their killing was in the months of February and March, when that snow crusts over. That's when those areas that I'd shed hunt, where now I was picking up dead heads instead. And it was happening throughout the other units around me, where people were sending photos of elk that they've been watching, some of my buddies who watch elk too. Elk they've watched for years, and the sickest feeling of all is when a wolf pack moves in, kills one of these old monarchs, and leaves it. Doesn't finish it. Takes 3 bites out of the hind quarter and they go off to the next one. That's the part that made me so sick to my stomach. That's where I felt like I was not being told the truth about wolves, where people said that wolves only kill the sick and the weak, and wolves only, they eat everything, they utilize everything. And I found that not to be true all the time. Sometimes, right? Sometimes I've watched wolves clean up a carcass really well, but I've seen them they waste a lot too. And the other thing to mention as well is, sometimes these wolves will kill, and if they leave a carcass alone, sure, they might come back a week or two later to check on it. Ravens have it cleaned up by then, so it's just a waste of an animal, in my opinion. And so for me, I'd rather kill a 340 bull in my area than a 380 class bull in New Mexico. That's just me. I'm even happy with a 300-inch bull. I love having the history with an elk or a mule deer. And the moose, don't get me started on the moose. We had incredible amount of moose. There was a day after high school, no joke. My brother and I get out of high school, and we pick up, it was close to 14 moose paddles fresh. And in that particular area, I think we ended up picking up 35 in just one drainage. Every drainage had a big pocket of moose. We had a lot of moose, and the moose were, I'd say, the first to go, because they're not as adaptable as elk are. I'd say moose just kind of stand around in their wintering range, and it seems that the wolves just hammer them. Elk will at least try to adapt, but moose not so much. And muleys are stubborn, and so muleys I feel like our muleys, they same thing. They find a pocket that they're not going to leave, and if wolf pushes them, they like to do a big loop and come back to their brush patch, and so they end up getting killed too. That was probably the worst massacre I've ever seen. Was in a mule deer wintering range. It was disgusting. It was disgusting. That happened probably that was shortly about 2008 when I saw that, when I was in a wintering range, mule deer. And again, I was so confused. I'm like, what killed all these deer? We didn't, usually it almost looked like a bad winter, something that a bad winter would do. But it was actually a winter it was pretty mild, I'm like, what happened to all these muleys? And that's kind of where it first started for me, at least, in realizing what these things can do. So pretty unfortunate, but I said, we finally turned the tables on them, I'd say.
So did you sell that?
Growing up,
Go ahead, Patrick. Sorry.
I was just going to say, growing up in Wyoming, we used to have a really robust moose population too. I used to be able to go up around the greater Yellowstone area, where we live, and you would see 6 to 12 moose just driving down the highway. You'd see them all over the place. And I would agree with you. The very first thing after the introduction in 1995, the very first things to go were the moose. I mean, the moose they disappeared off the landscape, and you see them still, but not nearly as frequently. And of course, the mule deer, they don't need another thing holding them down. And man, they've just been obliterated in lots of parts of Wyoming and Montana and Idaho. But to your point, I don't think that people, there's a lot of these so-called self-proclaimed ecologists out there and wildlife-loving people, and they say, well, wolves won't just kill for no reason, right? And I'm like, well, wolves enjoy killing, and they get into a bloodlust sometimes, and they'll get into a herd of elk or mule deer or whatever it might be, sheep, cows, and they just go on a killing spree because they enjoy killing things. They enjoy that pursuit. They enjoy taking down animals. And that's one of the dirty little secrets that a lot of people don't want to hear, right? And I have friends in Idaho too. So has that been your experience too as well, Tom, is that people just don't want to have that conversation?
And what was sad in our area, and thankfully we have better leadership now, but it was sad that we have the type of environmentalists that we have in our area. When I mean environmentalists, I think we all are environmentalists in our own way, right? Like, I care about the environment, but we're talking radical environmentalists. These people, they'll make decisions based on feelings and not studies. And like I said, I can count these people on 5 fingers, but they were the ones actually in charge originally. They were the ones that were holding public meetings and saying that, but they were pretty much they were begging for more wolves to be dropped in, and we were being told that we have not as many wolves as we thought we were. I mean, remember I told you about that first wolf I saw? I was told that what I saw is inaccurate because there's no wolves in our area yet. I was told by a wildlife biologist at that time that we don't have wolves in our area and that what I saw was not a wolf. I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure I know what I saw. And, how, for someone like me, how am I supposed to trust you if you're telling me what I saw was inaccurate? I trust you. I don't care if you love wolves or not. If you told me, you know what, let's look into it. Maybe there is wolves here. Then I'd gain respect for them, right? When you tell me what I'm seeing is inaccurate and there's no wolves in my area, that's telling me you're not even wanting to try. You know what I mean? Are you even really wanting to try? Or do you even care what's going on here? That to me, as a teenager, throws a red flag. You know what I mean? But like I said, so I won't get my high horse. I won't get on a soapbox there, but we got better leadership now, people that care, people that understand. We don't get hit as hard as you guys in Wyoming. When I go to Wyoming, I see those signs. This is what's happening to your wolves. I see it in Wyoming. I see it in Montana. Especially Idaho is like it. Well, I'll say the southeast side of Idaho. They got the billboards just because Yellowstone's right there, right? You see those billboards right there. But Idaho, for the most part, has really taken a strong stand on managing wolves, which I'm grateful for. I'm very grateful for. So, so not as much as you have, I would say.
I would agree with most of everything you said. I would add that, you know, they would call themselves, you know, wildlife conservation, you know, the uber far side that you're talking about. The term I heard not very long ago is non-contributory, right? We're all conservationists in our own right. I want to conserve more deer and elk and have them intact on the landscape to take my kids hunting for sure. But I also want to have the opportunity to harvest a select few. However, I put my money where my mouth is and donate money to conservation that efforts that are actually successful. So I want to get into successful is how do you, I mean, it sounds like you kind of took a little bit of a, from that first wolf to how on the first few in went when season started to the 3 that you killed. Now you're kind of focused on, and you've got a lot of success with killing wolves. How does a guy get into that? What are some specific tips and tricks of if somebody wants to go out and target a wolf?
Yeah, so the first thing I'd say is understanding the behavior of a wolf, right? And so I think that makes a good elk hunter, makes a good mule deer hunter, a hunter for anything. The first thing I had to do is, like, if I'm going to kill the wolf, I need to understand the wolf. I need to really figure out what's going on. And, you know, believe it or not, actually, these environmentalist groups gave me a lot of information, so thank you. So, you know, they're sitting there, they have their studies. I learned the language through them too. They have, you know, you got those centers where, you know, you're listening to the language of these wolves or watching videos of Yellowstone. And it was a combination of that, also a combination of experience. It was literally a 4-year learning curve for me, a 4-year learning curve to hunt wolves. And, you know, again, I was just like, for me, I try to be as much of a sponge as I can. You know, I got other hunters in the woods, other trappers in the woods. We're trying to, like, this is what I did and this didn't work, you know? So we started passing these ideas, and I will say this was the pinnacle of our wolf hunting success. I really don't know the date, but like I said, about 4-year learning curve. And then this one day I felt like we started to kind of figure them out. You know, we always hear wolves howling, but nothing's connecting. Well, finally we kind of figured, let's start something. We'll start with this and start utilizing more of, you know, not just howling, but prayer calls too. And it's no different than, like, you know, I start comparing it to like a herd bull, right? Like an elk. You get a herd bull bugling. When that bull elk is bugling, does that ever mean he's coming in?
So sometimes, I mean, it depends on what that herd bull's doing, right? Does he have a bunch of cows? Does he have other satellite bulls? Is he solo? I think that's where you're going with the wolves. Is this wolf with his pack? Is he the alpha male? Is he solo? Is he out hunting, or is he napping, right? I've had bulls that are in their bed, they'll answer you. Or I've had bulls that are in their wallow, or if they've got a few cows, they're going to come charging at you. And they're all three, even though they're bugling, back to the elk, you know, they all three have a different kind of stance attitude with whether you bugle at them or cow call at them. You know, if they've got other cows and they're bedded, they're going to answer you, try and get you come to them. But if they're just getting done in their wallow, they may decide to trot down that ridge. However, if they've got a few cows, they're pretty much going to go wherever the cows go. So, like you said with the wolves,
they might run,
you got to figure out what is that wolf doing? Why is he there? You know, is his whole pack right there with him?
And that's kind of where it became a little bit complex. But, you know, so this one scenario is really neat because, and I thank my brother for this because he actually found the pack, but there was a big pack he found, and that was another thing we started learning too, is, you know, what are the wolves' weaknesses too? That they're not just like what they're doing with their howls and stuff, but what is their weakness, and utilize their weakness too. And so the weakness of a wolf pack, what just on the top of your mind, I'm just going to ask you just a very simple question. What do you think would be a weakness of a wolf?
Defending his pack.
Yeah. his family, right? And so that's where we started to really get the success that we wanted. And so we found a wolf pack. We located him, got him howling. And we're like, okay, the first thing we're going to do here is let's move in close to kind of in the bedding area. What's the least, aggressive thing to a wolf? And that would be just a simple predator call. Let's just do a little tiny predator call, see what happens. And so we predator called, and seconds, not minutes, seconds, a big female came running out of the timber, came running right at us. And my brother dropped her, and they're like, we high-fived, got really excited. The wolves shut up. The sound of the gunshot kind of shut up the rest of the wolves. And after 10 minutes, we did some video and stuff, and we're like, and again, I thank my brother for this, because at that point, it was like, we didn't have much time. Like, it's starting to, like, we had less than an hour until it gets dark. The wolves are still on the other side of the drainage. And my brother's just like gung-ho. He's like, let's keep going. I'm like, ooh, like, you think, like, we're going to be in a crap hole here. Like, you get in there, and it's just thick brush, it's going to be pretty tough, but I trust you, bro. Let's do it. And like I said, I thank my brother a lot on this. And so we go in there, and I wanted to capture this on film, so I stayed being the camera guy, And so I filmed that first one that got killed. And as we moved in that timber, we were going back to the wolf behavior, right? We already killed one wolf. And that pack is missing another member of the pack, right? So as we moved in that timber, we started doing some wolf calls, some yips and stuff. And we had a wolf circling us in the timber, really thick timber. I mean, super close. It's like timber / brush. And when I mean brush, alder. So it's that brush above your head, but you're kind of looking through it, and there's just a wolf. I mean, now I'm saying under 10 yards. Yes, under 10 yards. So they get really comfortable in that thick stuff. But Travis couldn't get a shot off it. He's like, he'd pull up over here, wolf would be gone. Then it'd be next to me, and he's trying to push me out of the way to shoot the wolf, and then it disappears again. Well, we finally got him in through like where it's kind of open timber, where your shooting lanes are about 40, 50 yards. And there is he trotting off. He shoots. And I'm like, did you kill him? He's like, I don't know. Walk up there, big male. We high five, like, sweet, 2 dead wolves. And I'm like, all right, now what? He's like, let's keep going for the pack. I'm like, okay, it's getting dark. We got to keep going. So we kept moving in the timber, kept going up. And at this point, the wolves still don't know what's going on. My brother killed the only 2 witnesses so far. And then we get to the third wolf. And, there's another wolf, sees us. It takes off running, trap shoots, misses it. That immediately after that wolf pack, it met back up with the rest of the wolves. The wolves started doing these warning howls. Like, they started realizing something was wrong. And as we were moving up, this is a very weird scenario. But those wolves did a big circle around us and went right to where the first wolf got killed. And I never ever wanted to call it this, but I'll tell you what happened. So it sounded like a sorrowful howl. It was the weirdest thing. It was like almost like they were crying, which sounds bad, but that's what it sounded like. It sounded like a sorrowful howl, and then they took off. I mean, I never really knew, like, I that's what I did pick, but I didn't really have my facts straight to know if that's what really happened until I talked to other wolf hunters, and they said the same thing, where if they kill a wolf and then they move on, and then they'll hear the wolf pack do that. They'll come back to that wolf that they killed and start doing that weird, sorrowful howl. And you can tell it's so weird. I mean, it's hair standing, but there's like, and partially you're like, wow, I kind of feel bad. But it's like, it's like they just lost a member of their pack. But then after that, they just took off and left the canyon completely. They were out of there after they figured out they were in danger, But right there, that was our first real scenario where we actually started to figure out what was going on in the hunt. We're like, wow, that was pretty impressive, and how that worked. And so we just continued doing that and just figuring it out. And, we started getting consistent success. And mostly me, my brother, he's killed a few with me, but it's usually, usually comes out to where either we're together or I'm solo. And that's kind of what it ends up being anyways. But
so in comparison to, say elk hunting, some areas, some units I'm doing 8-10 miles a day and trying to sneak through the wallows and the meadows and the ridges and the bedding north timber and check if they're on the south facing feeding spots, right? But a 4 mile up, do a mile lateral, 4 mile back. That's a typical off trail elk hunting day. What kind of mileage are you covering wolf hunting to get into these packs?
Hey, it depends. Some wolves it's 8 miles. Some areas it's less. Depending on the amount of road traffic and stuff. I have located wolves off the road in areas where people just really don't spend a lot of time driving those type of roads. And then asking you a question, what do you think a wolf's strengths are? What makes it hard to hunt them?
They've got great eyesight, great hearing, and great smelling, and they're super intelligent. I mean, you see a border collie can be trained to run sheep through a gate just on whistles, right? Or guys are training their labs to open the fridge, grab the beer, open the brewer, and bring it to them in their chair, right? So you got to look at the gray matter inside those canine skulls is about half of what a wolf is gonna have. So intelligence-wise, these wolves are, I'm not going to say they're twice as smart, but they're certainly smarter than any canine that we've domesticated by far. So, they're going to very quickly, I've done a lot of trapping and coyote hunting, right? And I read a book, I want to say it was O'Gorman, it might not be. The Lonely Coyote, maybe. There's one part in that book where the trapper in the book talks about where you typically would just put one set and move on, put a secondary lesser set, not on that salient feature, that big rock or that big piss post that already has wolf scat or already has coyote scat. And trapping a wolf and a coyote, I think, are similar. You can confirm that to me. But what that book highlighted to me is it said, look, if you have two coyotes running down a fence line and you trap the front one, if you have a second trap within about 30-yard distance there that's in a less likely spot, but close enough that you can see that first spot, you're going to pick up that second wolf. And I saw a photo the other day, a guy had 13 coyotes in about a span of 150 yards by doing that on two winter-killed deer carcasses, right? Just a string of traps down there, because those coyotes didn't want to get 2 feet away, but they'd get 30 yards away and circle. And then while they're circling around and this coyote's, losing his stuff, then you'd pick up that second coyote. So I would think their strengths, more so than coyotes, is they have that pack dynamic. And so they send out scouts, right? I'm always running into lone wolves, but then they quickly howl and they call in the whole reinforcement when they locate something. And that pack mentality makes them strong, but on top of keen sight, keen smell, intelligence, and good hearing. The distance, those things can run. Patrick, we talked about in the last couple podcasts, is 30, 50 miles a day. They can travel.
And that's the tough part too, because my brother-in-law and sister, they hunt them and trap them in Alaska, and it's the same thing they witness. Like, they can cover so much ground in one day. And so that's the other thing that I've looked at is like, okay, so the strength is, you've talked a lot of them, pretty much covered it all really on what strength that a wolf has. And so again, it's back finding the weaknesses. What time of the year do you think wolves travel the least?
Probably spring, denning time.
Yeah. And so I utilize that a lot. Also rendezvous points. Those are areas where, sure, like wolves are going to, the one pack that I pursue, and, there's still a couple left to this day. It's hard to really get every single wolf. People say, oh, I killed the whole pack. It's like, yeah, I don't think I've ever done that. I've killed a lot of a pack, but there's always a couple left over. But this one particular pack, it's like their range is 400 square miles. I'm not even kidding. 400 square miles. But if you actually say, where are they at 60, 70% of the time, that terrain really shrinks. they're actually spending most of their time. And it's not just the spring, it's in the summer and early fall too. Those pups are still young and they're not moving much. It was funny. I had a conversation with a guy getting in the wolf hunt, and he's like, "What's your favorite time of the year to kill them? Is it February? Is it December?" I'm like, April or August. He's like, "What?" Like, I love August. Yeah, and that was back before Idaho did full year-round season. So the reason why that is, and this is something I realized, and you're going to hear this differently from people. Some people say they're vocal in the spring. I've noticed the opposite, where I feel like they're very protective of their den, and they're not like, they don't like to give their location as much, but when they have a den, right? And so I've tried really hard in the spring. As I try to learn how to hunt wolves, I've tried hunting throughout the year, trying to figure out what's the best time of year to kill them, what's the hardest time to kill them. Springtime, I'm still second guessing it. I've had some friends of mine though who have found those den sites where they actually find that they're consistent with those den sites. So if they den there, good chance they're going to den that same spot next year. So if you know of a potential den site, go there the following year, and most likely you're going to catch them. And it could be every other year. Sometimes if maybe you give them a bad experience start, you shoot them in there. It may be 3 or 4 years, but it's so crazy. It never hurts. I'm the type of person, I'll keep rechecking those areas, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're back in there again. They can't help themselves. There's something about that area. They just can't help themselves. Well, I've been utilizing those rendezvous points for those areas where they just, they'll travel out of country, but there's these areas that they just really love to hang out in and spend most of their time in. And you're going to get that more, like I said, in the summer and early fall months than you are in those November, December months when they're just all those adolescents are now full grown, and they're traveling with the pack. They're spreading out. They're hitting all these wintering ranges. They don't have those other food sources like gophers and smaller game as they used to, and so they start hitting the big game much harder. So they have to travel more, it seems like. But the one thing I've noticed too, and I've confirmed this with other coyote. You're talking about coyotes. Yeah, coyotes are very similar to this, where they'll den up in a spot where the pups can feed themselves. There's times where they have to drag meat in, right? They'll have to drag meat into the den site, and what's obvious, the obvious thing to see is like, okay, what's an obvious den site? We've all watched the movie Lion King, and I'm not trying to exaggerate here, but there's that scene where the little lions run in the hyenas territory, and there's all those bones everywhere. If you're in a spot like that where it's just like, what in the world is going on here? Just looks like something it's just a boneyard. Like, that's a den site. They're dragging chunks of meat, and a lot of trappers will tell you that too, because they're noticing that. Like, the trappers, they'll have their bait piles in Idaho, because we can bait in Idaho for trapping. Well, in the spring, they start dragging meat to the den site. Like, they'll just notice wolves taking chunks out and taking them off, and that starts happening. But going back to it, when they start getting old enough, if they have a spot where there's a lot of gophers and stuff, the adults no longer have to feed the pups anymore. They're gophering like a coyote. And I've watched them do it. I'd sit up on ridgetops and look in these meadows, and I've watched these young wolves just sit there gophering all day long. I've killed them, and they're just like, when I've killed some of these wolves, their mouth is just full of dirt just from gophering, all day. And so they really utilize those summering grounds, and it saves a lot of work on the adults, just because they're like, we don't have to feed them; they'll feed themselves. It's funny because from a distance, if you have a chance to glass them, you'll see them just like fed up on a hillside. The adults will, and then the pups are like a teenager. They're always moving around and stuff, but the adults are like, I'm too tired to move right now. Like, I don't have to move, so why move? And but the more you learn about wolves, the more and more you learn, like, we're hunting a dog. They're a dog, and I'm cool with killing a dog, but I don't know if everybody else is.
When you see what those dogs,
it's so comparable. Huh?
When you see what those dogs do to domestic livestock, pets, other actual domesticated dogs and ungulates, it's not as hard. What is one thing? What's the equipment? How does the equipment differ? Mainly, I guess, would be regards to scent than what you would use deer or elk hunting.
So one of the best things. So that's a very good question, by the way. Another thing I learned with wolf hunting is, when you're elk hunting, you're going after one bull, right? You're not sitting there with a pocket full of elk tags. Wolves, you got multiple tags and you're trying to utilize that time, right? You're not out to kill all the elk, but when I have a wolf, when I call it a wolf pack, I'm trying to kill every single wolf as I can possible. The other challenge I started facing is I was doing great with calling in wolves, right? Like we were calling them in, but the biggest challenge I was having is we'd call in a wolf pack, we'd kill one and then they'd scatter. And maybe you'd have a chance to call them in one more time or maybe two more times before they're wised up and calls are no longer effective. And now you have to leave it to the trappers. So I was like, how do I utilize that time when they come in? People think that an AR is the right tool, right? You hear it everywhere. There's a lot of wolf experts on Facebook and Instagram. And I'm saying that sarcastically. All you need is, if I just have my AR, I want to just blaze them all. It's like, you don't just aimlessly shoot wolves. You know what I mean? The last thing you want to do is scare them off. The most important thing I've learned with wolf hunting is you want to make every shot count. You're not here to fling a bunch of lead and have a bunch of missed wolves. Like, your goal is to make every shot count. But what led me to this idea was going back to when I had a bow. I was like, my chance of killing wolves were better with a bow because it was quiet. They're already an apex predator. They're not always in the alert. They're not always in, like a coyote knows it's not on top of the food chain. A wolf is. I can't tell you how many times a wolf will just come running in at me. And if I don't shoot, I'll just stand there. Because it's just like, what are you? And it never looks alarmed. If like a wolf, like if I'm in the backcountry and I see wolves that have never dealt with people, an elk will still run. A mule deer will still run. Maybe not as much because they don't have a lot of hunting pressure, but they're still going to run. They're still like, they're not on the top of the food chain. A wolf that has never been hunted before, they almost act dumb. They almost give the impression that they're dumb sometimes. But as soon as you wise them up, then you'll never have another chance on them again. So what I did is our whole family decided to get suppressors. And that was one of the best decisions I ever made. As soon as I got my suppressor, I'm like, that following week, I went out wolf hunting. And it took me 2 days. I found the wolf pack. I called them in, and I stacked 4 right on top of each other. And that one, you'll have to watch the video of that. It's point blank, really close. I keep on saying the term between 10 to 15 yards, but it was back at that same range, I've called them wolves really close a lot. And that's when people are like, well, what's the average range that you kill wolves? I say it's under 20 yards. I've called in a lot of wolves really close. And so, so I stacked those 4 wolves on top of each other, and they just didn't know what was going on. I shot one, and they were not looking at me where the gunshot was coming from. They were looking at each other. A suppressor still makes a sound, but it just wasn't enough to spook them off. And some of my friends down south of me have stacked 6 on top of each other with the suppressor. The suppressor is a night and day difference versus without one. I feel like I said, without a suppressor, you shoot once and they scatter every single time. And sometimes you can get them howling again, you can sneak in and get another shot, but I just feel like that's the best way to do it. So for equipment, honestly, I still run a bolt action, and I just run a suppressor, and I just make every shot count.
What caliber?
I got 2 different calibers. I have a 300 short mag, and it's built a little more tactical. Like it has that foldable XLR element stock. And so you could just fit it in your backpack if I need to go a long ways. And then I also have a 7 Psalm built by Gunworks. And it's just it's not a foldable stock, just a regular rifle stock, but it's super light. Without the suppressor, I mean, and the scope and everything, I think it's 7 pounds. Maybe it feels like a toy gun, but it's accurate up to 1,000 yards. Like I can ding plates at 1,000 all day long. Will I take it on a deer? Elk? No. A wolf? Absolutely. I always take that gun thinking I'm going to have an opportunity long range. Do I? No. They're always close. So, those are the 2 calibers that I like to run.
Do you do anything for scent? Anything different?
Just keep my wind in the favor. So when it comes to camping, you have to be really careful. Wolves are very aware of their surroundings more than any animal. We're talking about our 6th sense. I get that a lot with wolves, by the way. If I'm close to a wolf pack, I get that feeling like, oh, shoot, we're close. I know it. Like, I just feel it. Like, it's weird. But wolves have a sense, too. If you camp in an area somewhat within their territory, they'll find you. They'll know you're there. And they'll investigate you at night. They'll investigate your campsite. They'll mess around with your campsite. And then they'll leave the country if they deem you as a threat in some way. So with scent, I try to not camp in the area that I'm hunting wolves. I try to stay as far away from there as I can. Like I said, I'm not afraid to hike, but I try to keep my scent out of there. In areas where I have to spend 3 or 4 days hunting a particular wolf pack, I have to sometimes give them a break. Like if let's say I go in, I'm dealing with a wolf pack and it's one of those rendezvous points, and let's say I spook them off. I back out. Like I start reading the situation. I'm like, okay, I'm just making things worse. Back out, give it a couple days, then chill in there again. Go back in there and check. Sometimes they're not back for maybe a week, and then after a week later, then they show back up, and then they're back fine again in there, and then you have another chance on them. So leaving scent behind, I'm really careful with that, more with wolves than any other predator. We talk, road systems, trail systems. Don't take a dump close to the trail. Just stuff like that. Although what's really weird, though, is pee seems to not bother them. If anything, they deem it as a territorial thing. So you can pee on a log, and that wolf will come and pee on that too. And I've learned that with whitetail hunters too. And it still doesn't make sense to me, but pee is pee. That's what they keep telling me. And I've even had friends that are trappers that have trapped wolves with their own pee. They're like, oh, a wolf is here. I don't have any scent with me, so I'll just pee on the same tree and then set a foothold, and he'll hook the wolf. I'm like, it just seems weird to me, but they've done it to me too. I've peed in the spot, come back, and they've peed right where I peed just to mark their territory. They're very interesting animals, I tell you what.
They really are, and I've really enjoyed just learning a little more, because we can watch my sheep film. We got in a wolf encounter, and he wised up and got out of there. Never got the wind, never got anything. I just quit howling at him, and he laid down, probably higher elevation than us, and just watching the bottom valley for this other wolf that was howling. He was a mile away. We howled. He turned around and came about 600 yards back, so there was about 600 yards distance between us. And I didn't want to shoot that far, so I'm like, I can creep up this next bluff bench, hop over it, I'll be sub 300. While I'm hiking up there, nobody was howling at this wolf. And we've been howling at about 1 to 2 minute intervals. Well, it took me 10, 15 minutes hike up there. About 7, 8 minutes into the stalk, he turned and left, and he went up and over the cliffs and left. He decided, this ain't right. I'm gone. So they are incredibly smart. And I've heard wolves howl mostly at night. Living in Alaska there, I tried trapping them between Tustamina and Ski Lac Lake, and they had about a 10-day to 14-day cycle. So I had snares and traps everywhere. One thing I will mention is beaver dams and beaver ponds are a huge attractant to wolf packs. Those merge points, they would always hit that beaver dam, beaver pond. I put a couple traps on it, and they still too much scent, and they figured out where they're at. So the learning curve on this is, it's not somebody like you mentioned in the beginning, I'm just going to go out with a wolf howler and call these in, and it's easy. And Yeah. You'll learn that hunted wolves are a whole different level of difficulty.
It is. Well, this year, so you're talking about Alaska. So this year so my brother-in-law and sister live in Alaska, so I don't need to get a guide. I could just first to kin. So I killed a pretty big brown bear on the coast. So the day before, there was a big brown bear, but we flew in that day, so we couldn't pursue it. There's a stream with a bunch of salmon running it, and so I'm like, okay, we're gonna have to wait for the day. Well, there was a wolf pack fishing too, and they climbed out of the bottom and they climbed up on this rock bluff. It was the most painful thing for me to ever watch, because you can't hunt first day or same day airborne. I had to watch this pack, big white male with a big gray female and a bunch of members of the pack. Yeah, what was it, 7 or 8? I'd have to look at the video again. And that big male just laid there and he just stared at us. And then he finally fell asleep. The whole pack fell asleep. I mean, I'm just like, gosh, like I could easily sneak up 400 yards and just start popping them off. And in my brain, as I was looking through the spotter, I was like, what would I do? I'd shoot the alpha first, shoot the female, and just start dumping the red. And I just started replaying this scenario in my head every time. And my brother-in-law Adam, who's the pilot, and he landed. Yeah, that's his plane right there. And he's like, so what do you think those wolves are going to do, Tom? I was like, they're going to investigate our camp tonight, 100%. As soon as the sun goes over and we sleep, they're going to investigate our camp and they're leaving the canyon. I'm like, that's what I'm so worried about. I'm like, they're not going to be here tomorrow. I hope they are. I hope I'm wrong. But I'm like, but worst case scenario, we pursue that big brown bear, and wake up in the morning, just a couple of steps from camp, wolf packs circled our tents, they left in the dark. I was like, yeah, that's what I expected. They investigated us and they left. And so I went in there and I ended up killing that big brown bear, and he was 9'8", just a big old boar. So
was that on film too?
Cool. Yeah, it was a great film. I haven't posted on YouTube just yet. Currently editing videos right now, but it's a good film.
So what got you into the filming piece of all this?
So I think this was back, it was pretty much right at about the brink when we were getting out of high school, and, we watched a lot of hunting videos and watched Jim Shockey. He was kind of a legend to my brother and I. That was the type of hunting we always wanted to try. That's kind of what got us in hunting Alaska in the first place, was watching Jim Shockey adventures. But the one thing I would see on television, this was obviously before any other platforms out there, I wasn't impressed with what the professional hunter was. Like at that time, a professional hunter, what I was seeing on television were people that were doing ranch hunts. They were guys that were out of shape. And it's like, it was a money game, and these guys were buying them spots on television. And I'm like, this just doesn't seem like hunting to me. And so we started doing research, and we're like, we need to show people what real hunting's about. That's kind of where that's where our wheels started to turn. And again, I'm not dissing any hunters in the industry, like I think everybody's out to, try to make a living in it. And if you have the money to do a ranch hunt, go for it. I don't care. I just feel like, okay, like people need, like, I can't relate to that though. Like, I want to see something that's real, authentic, guys that actually work hard to kill something, and so that's kind of where we started with the filming. But we did that's kind of how we got involved with Gunworks originally too. Kind of the same time Gunworks started, we started as well, and they gave us a bunch of advice, and they're like, film, and they gave us some advice on filming, and they were like really good mentors from the get-go. And so I was able to, we were able to film a lot of hunts. We killed a lot of stuff that first year, just kind of locally where we live. And they aired it on the Sportsman channel, and it was kind of my idea to do the YouTube. When YouTube first came out, everybody else was against it, because when you get a really good video, people are like, I don't want to give that out for free. Like, I want to sell this DVD, you know what I mean? And I'm like, for me, I kind of looked at a different perspective of like, we just first need to get our name out there, and no one else is doing YouTube. So we started doing YouTube, and it actually took off pretty dang well. I still have a lot to learn, but I have some really good mentors that I still talk to and that help me out. And so, but I mean, right now we're at I think it's 220,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel, and a little over 80 million, I think a little over 80 million views total combined. So, yeah, I think we're like, we've built a pretty good platform on the YouTube channel, and that's kind of where we stuck with.
And what is that channel? What is that channel?
It's Stuck in the Rut. With an N, so stuck a rut. And so, yeah, it's been a fun journey, and we hunt with friends and stuff too, but it's kind of turned out to just be like a family channel where, like, there's 4 members of our siblings, right? My wife doesn't hunt. But so my brother-in-law, he married my sister, and he hunts, and he, like I said, he owns the plane, so that makes things nice. And so we have a lot of adventures in Alaska and Idaho. I started hunting Alaska before Adam officially moved to Alaska, so I've had quite a bit of experience hunting caribou and moose. But as soon as Adam moved up to Alaska officially and became a resident along with my sister, then it's fun. We really enjoy being out there. And having those adventures, but also like Idaho's always home. If I had the choice, I'd probably move to Alaska. But I don't think I can get my wife to budge. She's like, no, this is about as far north as I can get her.
I was going to ask you because I know YouTube channels, especially hunting ones, tend to get attacked by people. So like, how do you deal with that kind of stuff where, you get the people that just flock on there to make their negative comments and just be trolls? Like, how do you deal with those folks?
At first it was really hard because I feel like I didn't realize how cruel the world was, and didn't realize my first wolf ever. If you look at the first videos that we did, we filmed my first wolf I ever killed. The first one back in 2011. And it's very sketchy, it's very like shaky video because we were just starting. But that kind of really helped us get a good foundation because it was so new, wolf hunting was so new. And, but the death threats I got was just unreal. And I just didn't know. I tried to respond to them and I just wasn't getting logical answers. But forward 10 years later, those people I just can't take seriously. And if there's a day where I'm like sick and I can't do anything outside, like let's say I can't go to work, I'm sick, I can't work or hunt, and so I'm sitting here with a massive fever and I just need to break it, I'll get bored and start and messaging them. But like for example, yesterday I kind of went through comments and I'm just like, I don't have time for them. They can say all they want. I think what really hurts the most though is not these people that are negligent, like these anti-hunters, but what hurts the most are actually hunters that bash us. I think that actually kind of hurts more because I'm just like, we're on the same team here, bud. Like, what are you doing? Why are you trying to divide us? Like we need to be on the same team. Like, and some of them, they just misjudge a video, right? Where they're just like, oh, well, I bet you did this and that. And so, it's like, because I don't show that I hiked 8 miles, they think I killed it close to the road. It's like, I literally hiked 8 to 15 miles for that particular animal, depending on the hunt, right? But it's like, I worked really hard, but sometimes, I didn't have time to film my entire hike because I was so focused on killing. So the hunt actually made it look easier, right? Or people had a hard concept at first because we started deboning our animals back in 2011, 2012, and that was still a new concept for people. So everybody thought we were leaving the game. They're like, you just packed a rack out? Oh, I'm going to call the Fish and Game on you. And you're like, dude, like, the meat's in our bag. Back with the, Everly stock, that was like our first packs ever that had the concept of throwing meat in there. And those were pretty fun. They're good bags, and but like, yeah, it was such a new concept for people. deboning an animal. Hey, guess what? You don't have to pack the guts. You don't have to pack the bones. Isn't that something? What do you do with that anyway? The hide? You're not mounting it? Why pack the hide? So now a lot of people are doing it, but back then it was such a new concept for people. Yeah. Do you ever get any comments like that on your social media? Because you do a lot of fishing, right?
Yeah, it happens all the time in fishing. They're like, you didn't hold the fish right. You must have done this. You must have done that. It's like, dude, you're a fellow angler. Why are you being such a jerk about it? But people do it, and I think a lot of that on the hunting and fishing side is just people being jealous that you had a good catch or you had a good kill. It's like, instead of being jealous, just be like, good job, and if you want to make comments, you can private message people and just say, hey man, next time maybe think about this, but don't be a jerk about it publicly like that. And it happens, but it is what it is. I've gotten over it now. I'm just like, somebody didn't eat their breakfast and they're cranky. Whatever.
Or yeah, I mean that's true. And we just don't know what people are going through. There was a very, very few times where I have actually had to call the people. Like I told them, like, we need to talk. Like, you're obviously out of hand here, and we did call. And it's usually somewhere people do, like, I don't like when people are like, oh, I'm going to call a fishing game. Last thing I want to do is talk to the fishing game and explain a video on YouTube, and I'm just like, and it's like, there's no reason for that. Like, we didn't do anything wrong. We followed the law. Like, and so I'll call them and just like, what's your problem? And I've only done it to a couple people. A lot of it was like not even about that, but it was more of like hate. So my brother-in-law, Adam, again, I'm getting way off topic, but I'll just shorten it. But my brother-in-law, Adam, shot a sheep in southern Idaho, drew a sheep tag, killed a giant ram. Little did we know that someone else was pursuing that same ram. It's public land. We're not out to try to shoot an animal from another person. Well, that person supposedly, okay, I won't get into too much detail who they are, but anyways, they sent we got slammed on Instagram by like all their minions just got on and just like, I heard the story, what really happened with that sheep. And that was when I was like, we need to start putting out some fires here because this is getting stupid. Like, I was like, finally I started calling, I started working up because I didn't have that phone number, but I started working up the ladder and making phone calls and I'm just like, and the first thing I asked was like, what did we do wrong? And they couldn't really answer that. What did we do wrong? Oh, you shot it. Like, I had this. You shot that ram in front of a 27-year-old kid. First of all, 27-year-old, last I known, a 27-year-old is not a kid. Second of all, it's public land. Third of all, I didn't know he was after the ram. So what do you expect us to do? Well, I guess you bring it like that. Yeah, it just sucks for him, or it sucks for everybody. I'm like, well, it didn't suck for us, but, So anyway, sorry. Like I said, that was completely off topic, but that's another prime example. I was just like, that's a fire. Like it's unnecessary. That was completely unnecessary. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I give you kudos for, sticking with it, because sometimes people are just like, oh, I'm just not going to post anymore, and they stop, because but it's inevitable. It doesn't matter if you do it perfectly, if you have everything right. Like, there's always going to be the people that just don't like what you're doing for one reason or another. So I just want to commend you on that, because I've watched several of your videos over the last few years, and if you're an anti-hunter, you're not going to like them. Yeah. But you tell people right up front, like, you're not going to like this. If you can't handle it, you don't watch it. But the nice thing is, those of us who appreciate that enjoy that kind of thing, and we get to celebrate with.
Thank you. And that's what I have to remind myself is there's a lot of people with us, like, ignore those, like, focus on the people who really are sincere and people that really like your content. And, those are the people that, we need to focus on. I'll be honest. I've actually have made better friends in the hunting industry doing this. So, like, although it seems like, have we lost friends and stuff? Sure. Like, I still, like, there's friends that I'm somewhat friends with, but they're just kind of against the idea of doing films and stuff just because it promotes hunting, right? and they're kind of secretive type people. And I respect that 100%. I see their perspective. But what I've learned, though, is I've made so much friends. So I've made so many friends in the hunting industry. And another thing is just simply like actually being together as a community and being strung together as a community, we actually get stuff done. That's what happened to Idaho. That's why we're allowed to manage wolves, because we got together and said, let's manage this. And F4WM started that Foundation for Wildlife Management. And actually started some, pretty close to where I live. And that foundation right there has done more for wolf management than anything else you can think of. And so been really appreciative about that. But that's proof that when outdoorsmen get together, you can get stuff done.
And one of the things to highlight is the wolf population is stable yet increasing, even with all the harvests, all the red tape that had to go through to get hunting legalized. Well, Patrick's really, really good at saying the wolves are here now. We can cry that they were released. We can say that it was wrong and they shouldn't have been, but they're here now. Thankfully, in our home state, your state, a couple other states, there's a scientific-based management plan being enacted instead of just somebody's emotion ruling the day.
Yeah. And I wish, and it's nothing against, there's a lot of wildlife biologists and fishing game that are on our side. But there's a lot of these activists, people think it's always the fishing game's fault and stuff, or things are happening. Their hands are tied with these activists, I was actually with a conversation with one of the fishing game in Montana. Because right now, I think I was telling you, it's so competitive where I'm at. I want to start hunting Montana a little bit more. And Montana's not too far away. It's about 15-minute drive from my house to get to Montana. But I'm completely, it's so funny is I go from Idaho where it's just, there's so much hunt pressure. I go to Montana and the packs are as big as they've ever been. It's just oh man, yeah, Montana needs some help. But what's funny is these activists keep showing well, what if we have a year-round season, they're going to run out of wolves. It's look at Idaho. Can you just look on the other side of the border and just say, oh, look, Idaho has an open season on wolves. Are the wolves gone? No, they're not. They're still, like you said, they're still here. They're still reproducing. The one thing I will say that's helped is that I've been able to keep wolves out of my elk woods, and so have the trappers. And so I can't manage all the wolves, but in some of those drainages where that always stayed dear to me, there is a rebound coming, and I am so happy about that. So just FYI to people, there's hope. That, I think a lot of people have lost hope for that. And just let you know, there is hope. I'm seeing it. There was one area I was hunting this year, a lot of young bulls. And I was just man, I had more bugling probably this year than I've had in a really long time. Who's to thank here? And so I saw this activist the other day. It drove me nuts. She posted this post and Idaho and Montana elk hunting, there's an increase in the harvest. So I don't know, and she's talking about, Colorado wolves and how wolves benefit the ecosystem. It's do you know that there's been a season on wolves now for over a decade? Why did you completely ignore talking about Oregon and Washington? How are those out doing? They're not doing well. She ignored those. She's only talking about the states. Oh, look, the wolves are coexisting.
So we've talked about this before in the podcast. Yeah, we've talked about it before in the podcast where you can.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. Like I said, I could go on and on. I try to not rant too much, by the way, but FY, there is hope. there is hope. We're seeing a rebound going on, but still a lot of work to do.
Have you seen that video called how wolves change the rivers in Yellowstone?
Stop. No. Yes, I have.
I want to just highlight that anybody, because every time I read a thread, somebody brings that up and somebody misquotes it. It's called a tropic cascade, right? The theory might be sound in science, but that video is 100% incorrect. and the wolves didn't change the rivers and move. It's sickening when you watch the video how it masquerades as science and something that's good. And when you get to the end of it and you actually talk to a biologist and you dig into it, it's quote unquote fake news. It's garbage. So anybody that's quoting that, look up what a trophic cascade is, go do some research, and you'll find out pretty quickly that no, wolves are not the missing piece to the ecosystem, and they're going to restore the perfect balance of the Lion King, and then us humans can just walk away.
Yeah. And Patrick, you said it earlier. How are the moose doing in Yellowstone?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Moose populations have suffered so bad in this state, and it's sad, man. Like,
tell me there's not a balance. There's supposed to be a balance.
Yeah. There's not a balance, and it just breaks my heart, man, because I love moose. I think moose are super cool, and you just don't see them hardly anymore, and it's just the reality. And I was talking about this on our podcast about the Colorado thing. Like, Colorado has a ton of moose. It's about to change. People are going to realize pretty quick. Those moose are going to be the first ones that are gone.
Yeah, so we hunted this year. So I don't want to promote this, but I was like, gosh, being they're going to release wolves this year, let's burn our elk points. So my brother and I burnt our elk points in Colorado this year. What a cool, what a cool ecosystem. It actually reminded me of my childhood a little bit. I'll be honest in saying the quality of elk wasn't there just because there's a lot of hunting pressure in that area, but there's a lot of elk. We're in vehicles every day. The moose, tons of moose. We actually couldn't help ourselves. We're supposed to hunt elk, and we're sitting there. We're like, there's a big bull moose. Like, let's call it in. Oh, we start raking, get a big bull moose worked up. We were having a blast. I'm just like, we were filming it, and I'm like, and I'll get that posted too in the near future. I'm just kind of working on those videos, but I'm like, this is going to be sad. But what I've been telling everybody asks, what should we do as Colorado residents? I'm like, document it. Our mistake was we didn't have the iPhone and stuff when it first started happening, like when the real damage starts. By the time everybody started recording it, it was already too late. The damage was done. And people were like, well, they try to blame other things. They didn't have the actual proof. And the unfortunate truth was, and again, we have great leaders, I do actually like our fishing game right now. I like our leadership. But the one lady I was talking to, and again, I'm not going to give any names, and I was asking her, I like to attend those meetings, like when they have those public meetings. And I asked them, I was like, when's the last time you did a study here on our wildlife? Besides the grizzly bear, she said 18 years. That was what she told me. And I was like, I think
crazy.
I think we're missing, and she was kind of going based on studies 2 units away, which that's a long ways away. And I'm like, I think you need to reconsider doing some studies. And a few of us got together and we're talking to them, and it's good. I'm glad to see that I'm in the mountains and I'm seeing elk with fish and game collars. I'm like, that's what I like to see. Shows me they care. I'm tired of looking at grizzlies with collars. I'm like, we have enough of those. I'm tired of looking at those. And let's actually see some deer and elk with fish and game collars for once, and they spend plenty of time with the grizzlies and spending our taxpayer dollars on those. Let's study things that are actually going to make a difference. But I think that what's going to be a game changer though is if we can just delist we don't even have to hunt the grizzly, but if we can just delist the grizzly, that's going to expand so many options in hunting and trapping wolves for us. It really is. That's a big hurdle right now. And on top of that, we got the lynx that messes with us too. So that's a little bit of an issue. So.
Well, I'm glad there's some issues out there, and keep promoting conservation and being part of the solution, right? To be part of the solution, you got to be putting your sportsman dollars into ungulate management, but there also has to be predator management to balance it out, because without it, it doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah, and the one thing I want to mention too to people is like, let's never ever promote breaking the law. I get people like I've been getting a big wave of people, because we posted about Colorado and what's happening there. You said you did a podcast on it, so we won't even talk about it. But a lot of people are coming on like, we need to kill the wolves. You're like, you don't realize like that's just going to make things worse. You know, like as bad as it sounds, we're going to have to let things happen. We need to be responsible. That's not going to be how we get our way. You know what I mean? Like, I hear people, Stone, Idaho, shoot, shovel, shut up. Dude, we can hunt wolves here. We don't have to break the law. You know what I mean? It's like the biggest changes are not there, but we need to get involved. You know, same thing with Oregon, same thing. Like I've there's good, like nothing against the hunters, but I spent some time doing some shed hunting in Oregon, and I got some backlash over that. I posted a couple sheds I found, and some people got upset over it and told me to go back where I came from. I'm like, you guys, we need unity here. Like, you guys are in this small little crowd, and you guys are losing your battle with wolves. You can't manage your wolves. We need to band together to make a difference, and that's kind of what's most important. Starting off, F4WM. What are some other foundations you guys like that you feel like are really beneficial to predator management?
So there's a bear one out there that's starting up I think they started in Idaho, right? And I don't have their acronym. The one of those that's not really predator management, but Elk Foundation is one that I really enjoy because they conserve habitat, which in turn conserves everything, right? And I agree with you.
They've actually helped with F4WM too. Foundation, yeah, the Elk Foundation has. So
whether you're a birder, right, and I mean a birder with a camera that likes to take pictures of a bird, or you own a shotgun, or you have a shotgun and a rifle and a fly rod or a spinning rod, and you use bait and flies and worms, I don't really care how you want to recreate outdoors. If you like to just go hiking along a stream and throw rocks, we need to come together with the guy that's there to set traps, and with the guy that's there to catch and release salmon, and the guy that's there to catch and keep salmon, and the guy that's there to kill the elk. We need to come together and realize that there's very few places on this globe that we have the public land resource that we do have. And, we need to keep it to where all user groups get equal access. This denying or banning one group or favoring one group over the other is not the way forward.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's just so important. Like I can't emphasize that enough, and I feel like Idaho's doing actually very, very well with unifying outdoorsmen. I think Montana's doing better, like I'm not dissing any state, because Montana I consider as a second home for me, because like I said, 15 minutes from my house. My dad actually did most of his logging, in his early, like before I was born, in Montana. He lived in the Montana side there. And so a lot of that country, I put a lot of tracks on the ground. We go back in time, when I was a kid in high school, I could buy a resident deer tag and elk, a non-resident deer tag and elk, and then I'd get a Montana deer tag and elk. And so every single year I'd have 3 deer tags and 3 elk tags. And it was, so I really enjoyed hunting both sides of the line, Idaho and Montana. And it is sad to see what's happened, but like I said, like we're seeing a rebound, and we're seeing outdoorsmen get together, and we're beating these environmentalist groups at their own game. Yeah, very fortunate with where we live and the people that we work with. So it's awesome.
So my 2 cents on beating the environmentalist groups, because it really is, one side versus the other, one far left side and one far right side.
I wish we were in the middle. I wish we could talk things out, but it just seems to not work that way, unfortunately.
So if you are still here with us and you are on the other side of this issue, the thing I would challenge anybody out there to do is definitely support one of these nonprofit groups, right? But look at where the dollars and the funding and the spending go. Simply put, with the majority of the hunting conservation groups, 90 cents on the dollar goes to boots on the ground conservation efforts. I don't care if it's Pheasant Forever, Ducks Unlimited, National Turkey Wildlife Federation, Elk Foundation, Muley Fanatics. It doesn't really matter. The Mule Deer Foundation, pick a foundation. We can talk about it. The Wild Sheep. If you look at the pay structure, if you follow the money, 10% is admin fee and 90% goes to conservation projects. You look at some of these others, and I'm not going to list them, but I'm going to tell you to go look at their finances, and their admin fees are 70, 80, 90%, and then 10% goes back to some sort of, pretend conservation effort. Usually that's litigation, lobbying to stop some sort of outdoor activity. So just, if anything, quit donating to those groups that aren't perpetuating. They're non-contributory. Quit giving them your dollar.
Exactly. And I know which ones you're talking about, and I won't say it either. It is what it is. But yeah, I agree with you 100% there.
So what's, too quick. Well, I guess we got to get through a couple questions. I'm going to rapid fire them off because we do them for everybody.
Okay, I'll be faster. I'm sorry. I'm answering questions very slow. Okay.
No,
here we go.
So, one weapon, one species to hunt, and your favorite meal and how to cook it. And then
species to hunt. Gosh, that's a long answer. Dang it. Supposed to have to cook. Okay. Started with elk just because I've hunted them for so many years, and that's kind of what my dad got me into. But I will say that to kill a bull that excites me, like of size, it's hard to find those anymore, on general tags. Like, I feel like you kill enough big ones who are like, I killed a bull this year that was 8 years old, and he was 320 if he didn't bust all his points. And I'm like, gosh, like, and when I killed him, I was like, oh, that's a good bull, and I'm happy with him. But I'm like, gosh, he's an 8-year-old bull. He wasn't going to get any bigger. So to me, what really excites me, muleys. Like, muleys have like slowly, I still love elk hunting. It's still part of me. But muleys have slowly transitioned me. Like, I'd say I really, really started getting into it back in 2011, the muley hunting. Maybe a little earlier, but like in my later teens, thing is we had to like really hit an elevation to find them. Like, they're not like, when we go to like Wyoming, they're at the valley floor. Where I'm at, whitetails at the valley floor, you have to go hit an elevation to find muleys. And so you actually have to even see the first muley doe, you have to be, 3,000 feet above where I'm living. And so, and then then beyond that, you're in good muleys, at least before the wolves. But anyways, it's just something about the muleys and where they live that just gets to me. And it's like hunting a sheep with antlers, I guess you could say. I love where they live. Anyways. Sorry, that was supposed to be quick. I can
concur. I've answered this question several times. For me, it is archery elk, but I've killed a couple of those big bulls, and I'm done chasing inches. I'll still shoot a 306 point all day long, and that's a great bull. But I'm quickly transitioning to be, and not sagebrush muleys, high alpine, above timberline mule deer. I've been doing it with a rifle, and I'm switching to archery. So are you switching to archery? Or are you sticking with the rifle?
It depends. So in a November rut, with a general tag, it's actually pretty dang hard, even with just a rifle, And I did kill a nice buck. I'm going to get him aged. I have only 1 year. Well, no, sorry, we do have 2 years of sheds to him. I got his tooth sent to Matson Labs. We'll get him aged as well. But I do want to do some archeries outside the state. There's a lot of good archery opportunities where it's like archery only in November, and I kind of want to try those. I just competing against people. That's the problem, is I'm competing against people with a rifle. So it's like, I just don't like doing that. But we do have like an early September season, and I would love to start killing some velvet bucks during the archery season. But sometimes I'll be chasing a muley in velvet, and I start hearing elk bugles, and I just get distracted. I'm so like, oh, I better go after that bull. I'm like, we'll go back after that muley later, and then elk start to distract me. So that's usually what ends up happening in September.
Tell a funny story. This year, I was in a unit where archery elk was open and rifle mule deer was open. So I was packing both the lightweight .6 and the bow. And every time a bull would bugle, I'd throw the rifle somewhere and go chase a bull while we were glassing for mule deer. And I'd obviously mess it up solo and come back and glass for deer. And then when we switched from kind of the mule deer area to the elk area, last 2 days, I found some really nice mule deer. I'm like, forget these elk. Let's go chase those mule deer. And so,
if you have a good buck inside, that's kind of hard to pass up either.
if you had to procure one source of protein and cook it, what are we eating it, and how are you cooking it?
Well, I'm a very simple man. I typically go with when I kill an animal, the deer, elk, and especially if it's like something like the muley that I killed recently that is not going to taste so great. I'll be honest, he's a little stinky, and I let him age and everything. But I cut the steak separately, but then I make the rest in the hamburgers and smokies. Typically, deer smokies, like the scraps go in the smokies. Elk, it's hamburger. But smoky meat, I don't know if you guys know what it is. It's just kind of like a big hot dog. And man, I just fill up my freezer with those, and I just eat those on the go all the time. I feel like if I'm logging in the woods or hunting, I'm always throwing those in a campfire or in a microwave, or just, it's a quick meal, just quick protein, get up and go. And so I'm not myself, I'm not like the chef, but I'm just like, yeah, that's good enough. I'm not really much in the flavors for food. I just like to fill the belly and go. And my wife is kind of weirded out about that. She's like, you don't really put any spices on this? I'm like, no, just make it. Like, I just got to fill my belly. Let's go. And so, smokies. Okay, again, that was supposed to be a quick answer. Smokies. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Well, I'll help you out. And Doll sheep's my pinnacle, and then antelope.
Oh, okay.
Antelope and moose are tied.
Can I take it back? Can I take back what I said?
You can.
Doll sheep is really good.
Doll sheep is, but that's very pretentious to say. So I'll tell you that, wife killed a moose. I've lived in Alaska. I got some moose a couple times, and moose is really tough to beat, but a properly cared for antelope is a close second behind the Doll sheep.
Okay. Moose pre-rut.
Yes.
After the rut, it's kind of like the opposite. Okay.
All right. So one thing we didn't get into is, it sounds like there's a wolf class out there. If people want to know more, what is it? How do they get a hold of you? Where are your handles? And then the last question is, what's in store for the future?
Okay. And then a question that I have for you is, are you able to put that in the description stuff so people can find it?
Yep. We're gonna link all this in the show notes. So.
Okay, good. And so, I have an online wolf and a mule deer masterclass, but mostly I'll talk to you about is the wolf masterclass. If for people that can't attend the camp in person, I have an online class. It's very simple, www.wolfhuntingmasterclass.com. And, on there, you can take it at your own time. And, we wanted to do in-person camp originally, but it was around COVID when it hit. And so we started doing online, and it's actually been really good. And it's helped a lot of people out and just cutting that learning curve. And it's priced somewhat high in the sense that some people might like, oh, why is it so high? But for a lot of people, it's well worth it. I mean, if you, like me, who had to spend 4 years of that learning curve, you and I were talking, David, about how much fuel and just setting traps out and stuff and all that. Like it takes so much time and money to hunt or trap wolves. And if you could just cut that learning curve, it's going to save you so much money in the long run. So I got the online class. So www.wolfhuntingmasterclass.com. Then we have an in-person camp in Southern Idaho where you can attend the camp. We have lodging, a place for you to stay. It's an awesome place. We got myself and a couple other guest speakers, and we cover everything wolf, from hunting to trapping them. And it's in person, one-on-one. We train you how to use calls, and yeah, I mean, just a little bit of everything, and put you in certain scenarios. We had a really fun, actually the biggest highlight, just like an archery shoot. We did kind of a close range. I was telling you how many wolves I've had up close. I created a bunch of scenarios in the woods where I set a bunch of wolf targets up where people had to take these quick rush shots, and everybody just loved it. It was just like the pinnacle of the camp. And so I put everybody in those scenarios, because the other thing is, like, the mistakes people make is the shot. I was telling you how close wolves get to me. I can't tell you how many people they call in wolves, they come in close, and people panic. They're like, holy crap, I have this big monster wolf coming at me. And they start flinging lead before they even put the crosshairs on it because they get so scared. They don't keep their cool. And so I like to show people those scenarios and get them involved with that. But so that is there. It's the Western Wolf Academy. You can get a hold of me. Simply Instagram, but I'll put it in the handle. It's Katie. Should I look it up, or will you just put it in the handle?
We'll just stick it in the show notes for sure. And
so there's an email you can reach out from Katie Smalls, and she kind of works with all that and gets you guys set up for the camp. So, but yeah, it's fun, and we keep it small, just so that we can customize the experience for you. So, yeah. All right, continue.
So what's in the future? What's coming up?
All right. So, like I said, I have to switch gears on wolves just because it's not a bad thing. We've been managing our wolves pretty well in this unit. So I'm going to start focusing on Montana a little bit more and start hunting there. I was talking to that fishing game officer the other day, just picking the brains of like some of the rules that I may or may not know. I read the rules, but I'm just like, I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything here. So he helped me out, and so I may start trapping. We need snow though. We're pretty it's pretty bad out there right now, and I think you guys are fighting the same thing. We have like no snow on the ground. It's like really hard to pattern wolves right now, especially for all trappers. So that guy I was telling you about that I consistently bring up, and now he's my neighbor, who him and I both were learning about wolves at the same time. He's trapped over 100 plus wolves as of last fall. But this year, he hasn't trapped a single wolf. And so it just shows you we've been managing him pretty well to where I'm like, he's looking for wolves now. I'm like, hey, this is a good thing. That's not a problem. And we know they're going to come back. It's just what they always do. But as of now, I think I need to travel just a little bit outside of where I live. Just because, between me and 3 other trappers, we've got them hammered hard. So we're going to do that more. And but then, let's see. Okay. Besides wolf, I'm going to hunt Alaska again. I love Alaska. So, trying to work in a moose hunt. I think my back's healed from the last moose. So it took about 15 years, but I think I'm ready to go again.
And if anybody out there listening wonders if he's just being a wimp, you're talking eight plus 80-pound packs. So you're, and then the horns. So you're 8, 9, 10 trips of moose on your backpack in sometimes knee-high swamp. It is grueling, nasty. I haven't done that quite yet, but I've told a lot of people my soul is in Wyoming, but my heart's in Alaska. And so I have a resident access as well. I was up there this spring and this fall trying to get my brown bear. Kudos to you for getting yours. That is my bucket list. I will be chasing brown bear again this year. So I'm glad to hear that you'll be out there doing the wolf thing.
Yeah. And so I thank you very much. Yeah. And I do want to hunt wolves more in Alaska too, as well. My brother-in-law and sister got some pretty good points picked out, and they've been patterning them pretty well. So, I definitely want to explore, like, kind of my goal with, like, again, and getting more of the wolf classes involved. I want to gain more knowledge in hunting other regions too. What's great is I am bringing some guest speakers that hunt wolves in a completely different territory. The terrain is way different than ours, and so that brings a very unique experience for people to get 2 different perspectives from wolf hunters and trappers.
I think
then, of course, like
Patrick can add into this, but I think what you'll find, in predator management in hunting wolves, there's going to be a core similarity. 70% of what you do in your drainages in your home state are going to work in Alaska, in Maine, in maybe Colorado someday, going over to Montana. But there's going to be like 30% different. I think it'd be like chasing large predatory fish species from body to water to body to water, body to water. They're still a predator. They're still going to do the same things, but sometimes, there's going to be minutia differences of different tackle or different things that really don't work, in that situation because of either terrain or temperature or weather differences.
Exactly, and you're right about that, because my brother-in-law and sister, they've trapped a lot of wolves out of there, and they got a good number of wolves they've killed. Some hunting too, but like, you know, talking to them, and like, wolves have those same rendezvous points in Alaska. You know, they do the same, like their patterns are all the same. The only things that are minorly different is, for example, their food source. So you got these caribou herds migrating through, the wolves are following those caribou herds. So again, it comes back being a hunter. You know, it's like I could say, okay, well, use a dying elk call or an elk in distress. Don't go to Alaska and use an elk in distress call. You know, like, why would you do that? You know what I mean? So I'm saying is just like, you have to adapt to the animal. You have to think, okay, this is what a wolf is doing right now. Hunt according to that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you nailed it on the head.
That's part of thinking like the wolf, right? Getting your head in their space. And I think that works across the board, whether you're targeting waterfowl to, you know, the big charismatic ungulates to fish species, right? You got to get in their space and figure out what they're doing. Would that be right pre and post spawn there, Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, it's really the same concepts pretty much anywhere you go. Like, I think about muskies or pike.
Don't keep me started on muskies.
Yeah, they're predators, right? And so they have similar behaviors if you're in Nebraska or if you're in Tennessee or if you're in Ontario. Like, you just have to figure out, like you said, like that extra 30% of like what's a little bit different in this area. Like, it's usually the forage species, you know, to your point with wolves, same thing. Like, what are they hunting? You want to imitate what they're hunting. You want to get them something that's going to cause a reaction, because, I mean, you want to use their instincts against them. And so if you already understand all of those instinctual things, and then you can figure out what they're feeding on, you have a way better chance of being successful, just like with wolves.
Yeah, exactly. Again, nailed it on the head. Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. It's been wonderful. It's been educational. Hopefully we didn't offend too many people, but you know, I've said it before. My goal is to stick a wolf in a trap someday, and I don't want to see all the wolves removed from the landscape. I want to see them responsibly managed, and I want to have the opportunity for my grandkids to not only hear a wolf, but after they hear that wolf howl, to get to go chase him down and experience what that is to be part of the ecosystem.
Yeah, I just wanted to say big thanks, Tom, for coming onto the podcast. I know it's a big time commitment, and, you know, having family and balancing it all is a big deal. So thank you so much for your time. And I've learned a lot. I thought your story about getting 3 wolves in that short amount of time just blows my mind, man. So thank you for sharing that. That's super cool.
Oh, thanks, guys. Thank you for having me on. And I enjoy talking about, I don't know if you can tell, but, you know, I'm probably having just as much fun as you guys. You start talking about it, and I just start, I don't know, like I start remembering those scenarios, and my heart starts racing again, like it just happened. And so, yeah, I try to not psych myself too, but I have to keep calming myself down as we talk about wolf hunting, because as you can tell, I get a little excited about this topic. So, yeah.
Well, everybody out there, sorry this ran a little long. You know, just so you guys know, we're right at 2 hours, and it feels like we started 5 minutes ago. So.
Yeah. No, thanks, guys. Yeah, no, I actually didn't even look at the time. Holy crap, it has been 2 hours. So, okay.
All right. Well, hold on 1 second. I'm going to play the outro, and we're going to move on. So everybody listening out there, thanks for joining in. It's been great learning about this. Definitely go check out Tom's YouTube stuff. You can check out some wolf classes. They've got their in-person camp and their online resources. We'll have links. You guys can check those out if you want to know more. And don't forget, you know, when you do get your ungulate, High Mountain Seasoning goes on it. We'll try and convert Tom to putting a little spice in his life. And then if you're going fishing, check out PK, and don't forget about Old Bow Spider.
Thanks again for listening to the Radcast Outdoors podcast. We hope that you've enjoyed the show. If so, please go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this podcast and subscribe, share, and give us a 5-star rating, which really helps other people find the show. You can find all of our shows, recipes, giveaways, videos, and much more at radcastoutdoors.com. While you're there, please help support the show by purchasing a Radcast Outdoors shirt or hat. Please don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We also have a Radcast community on Facebook called Radcast Nation, and we'd love for you to join in the conversation there. And of course, please help support our sponsors who make this show possible. Thank you again to PK Lures, Bow Spider, and High Mountain Seasonings. Until next time, get out there and enjoy the outdoors.